This is a production of Off the Hook Sports with Dave Hooker.
Welcome to Chalk Talk, brought to you today by our friends at Owl's Nest Barbecue and also Steve Ray's Midnight Oil right there in beautiful Ottawa, right off the interstate. It's easy to find, and they are a proud Michelin carrier, and they certainly should be. Michelin is always the tire that I go to when it's time to change those tires. And it doesn't matter if it's just a simple oil change or some more work that you need. They can certainly take care of it right there at our good friend Steve Ray's Midnight Oil. Now, but I'll tell you this part. I was there, man, and Chris knows good food with Chris Landry. I'm Dave Hooker. Again, LandryFootball.com, and you've got to check out his site too because he's got the draft stuff coming out left and right. There's no off season when it comes to football. But Chris, I want to, man, you know good food. You're down in Louisiana, but man, I had some good barbecue on Saturday afternoon.
Oh.
If you had to choose between Creole and barbecue for the rest of your life, what would you choose?
Oh, boy, that's tough. I got to tell you, I mean, the initial thing when you say Creole, I grew up in the South, so I'd probably lose my Louisiana card if I didn't say Creole. But I'll just tell you this: if this is an indication of the true answer, it's 2015, and I had major heart surgery. I had a mechanical valve put in, and as I'm recovering in the hospital, I don't know why. But I have this craving in the bed. And, you know, you're getting the hospital food and you're doing all the vegetables and all the things you're supposed to. I have this craving for barbecued ribs. And, I mean, it was so and I kept saying it and I kept saying it. And I think it was my sister, my brother, told the doctor, man, he's craving barbecue ribs. He looks at me and he says, no. He said, not right now. But it took a while. And this was in May. It was to July 4th, and I had me some barbecue ribs. So maybe that's the real answer, that I'm not so sure that it might not be barbecue. I love barbecue of different types of meats, but I just love that. I even love hamburgers, chicken. Yeah, I'm a big barbecue guy.
Fantastic selection of grills, and Owl's Nest Barbecue right there in Ottawa has the largest selections of rubs and sauces in the tri-state area. We're talking about Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, and probably beyond. The number one Green Mountain Grill dealer in the area. Expert advice from Steve Ray. He is Kansas City Barbecue Society professional. That's the KCBS, as they call it. It makes it sound official, but he is. He knows how to do it. And the barbecue I had this past week was unbelievable. Great selection of pellets and charcoal, plus wood chunks as well. Okay, so we've got a ton to get to, and let's go ahead and begin that. As it's hard to believe that football season is right around the corner. But one of the things I did want to ask you about, in particular with Tennessee, that we have talked about is, Chris, when we start talking about tempo and that sort of challenge, I know we've discussed this before, but Josh Heupel wants to go 1,000,000 miles an hour. How important is that to balance that with the defense and the ability for them to stay fresh? And how challenging is that?
It's very challenging. I don't think that there are two things that I think sometimes people overlook. When you go fast, even when you score, think about the time difference or the time gap between your defense leaving the field and having to come back on the field. So it's common sense. If your defense is on the field for 90 snaps a game versus 70, you're going to give up an average more points. You're on the field for 20 more plays. Common sense. But then if you're thinking about you're on the sideline for a shorter intervals between the time you come back on, less time to recover your body and less time to adjust to what you're seeing upstairs and communicating. So it's not just the tempo as people think. It's the fact that they're on the field more, the less time to adjust. So I think there is a balance. What I think to me, is where I think to get to championship level, you have to have the type of balance to where, now I use this phrase a lot, where you can run 2-minute offense really well and score quickly, which they've got that part of it, I think, pretty much in hand. But you've got to be able to have some success with, even if you don't like the huddle, do some of it or take time off the clock with your offense and be effective moving to where you can out scheme a defense, out physical a defense by having the ability to use some clock and still score. Because when you've got a 17-point lead, it's important that you go on, I think, and it's third quarter. I mean, I think it's important. Say it's early third quarter. I think it's important if you get the ball, the best way to assure yourself of wins is to go on a sustained drive where your defense is fresh, your defense has adjustable time, and yet you're going to take 5 minutes off the clock and score 7. Not saying, hey, don't score. It's just if you go quickly and score, and then, they come back and score again, and then maybe you miss an opportunity, they score again, boom, it's a 10-point game. It's a 3-point game. And this is what happens in shootout games. Sometimes you look like you've got a game in hand, and it's never in hand. I think that you've got to have the ability to complement that. It is difficult because if you build your team on the tempo and on offense and don't focus enough in practice and in tempo to help your defense, then even if you recruit great defensive players, your defensive players are going to look pretty average. I go back to the perfect example. This an Alabama defense a few years ago, the Deshaun Watson team, that Clemson team that beat Alabama, that defense was a great defense. They were on the field, Alabama's defense, I think 96 snaps that game. What happened at the end? At the end, Alabama couldn't stop them. That
Right.
great defense, the load of NFL talent, couldn't stop them. Why? Because their legs were like spaghetti. And so the point is it's exciting and you can win games, but you're not going to be able to win championships unless you can play better complementary ball. And so I think that's going to have to be a concerted effort. And I'm curious to see, as I've mentioned to you before, is Josh going to make that adjustment down the road, or is it going to be more along the lines of what Lincoln Riley did at Oklahoma, where the defense was never good enough? And, oh, by the way, when their offense didn't hit on all cylinders and it was just good but not elite, they looked like an average football team because they didn't have anything that they could, sink their teeth into defensively. And that's where I think Tennessee needs to look at. And then I think the biggest thing is to make the move up the charts in the SEC. Tennessee can get, and they have gotten better and better, and they're going to be a tough out for any defense. But are they going to be championship level without having a defense that is going to be built with just, hey, well, we're going to create a few turnovers and get our offense a couple of more possessions and outscore people? I think that's going to be the key. I'm not predicting that they are or they aren't. I'm excited to see where he takes this down the road, and I think it's going to ultimately determine the ceiling of how high he can take this Tennessee program, because in the SEC, you better play some good defense or you're going to be, this is, if you want to be Mississippi State, you want to be maybe an Ole Miss, you want to maybe be a, Kentucky doesn't do it. They do it the opposite way. If you want to be a team that can be pretty good and go to bowl games, I think they're there. But if you want to be championship level 5 years from now, I think they need to modify.
I got a question for you about Hendon Hooker and where exactly he would rank among the quarterbacks this year. First, I want to remind you that Chalk Talk today is brought to you by our friends at Steve Ray's Midnight Oil right there in Ottawa, alongside Owl's Nest Barbecue. Steve Ray's Midnight Oil has been in business since 1983. That's nearly 48 years. They brought Steve, then they brought the dirt. Ottawa's only Michigan tire dealer, the best value and service on Michelin tires. And mounting and balancing of your Michelin tires, absolutely free. Purchase your Michelin tires from a real neighborhood working service station. Yes, they do exist. That's the Midnight Oil in Ottawa, Steve Ray's Midnight Oil. And check out that bar, Owl's Nest Barbecue right next door, because it's pretty darn incredible. So, Chris, and again, go to Chris Landry's website, LandryFootball.com, if you want to stand around your compadres, wherever we stand around now, whether it's Facebook or whether it's I guess it still could be the water cooler, wherever you're standing around now, and you will know more than all of the other people in your circle when it comes to football combined. I can promise you that. LandryFootball.com, well worth the subscription. Chris Hendon Hooker had the choice to come out. I don't think it would have been a wise choice, but he could have. And especially nowadays with NIL money, I don't think it would have been a wise choice. But that being said, when you look at him, and if you were to project him in a class that most people think, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, most people think is kind of a weak quarterback class for this draft, where would he be in that mix?
Oh, he's not ready for the NFL, and some of the guys that are coming out are not ready. But he wouldn't stand out and still rank very high among the top echelon of guys. You know, it's unfair to, as I've got all my quarterback grades up on Landry Football with these guys, there's a certain way you go about grading them. And I've seen Hendon, but if I were going to put him in a grade, I'd probably put him into that maybe 5.5 grade category, which would be kind of, fourth round value-ish. That doesn't mean that's where he would go. I don't have, for example, in this year's draft, a quarterback with a first-round grade, but you're going to probably have three of them go in the first round. So I think he has a chance to improve his stock, to prove his technique. He's not ready, and I don't think he would have, even in this class, stood out. So the whole theory of, well, it's going to be a better group next year, which it could be, what does it matter? You need to I always tell players, well, I may be ranked. None of these guys are ready, and you're not ready, and you just want to get readier, get closer, because if you don't make it, then it doesn't matter what class you come in or how early you come in or how soon you start your clock. If the clock ends real quickly if you're not ready. So, and the only way to really get ready is in college, because the NFL is not a developmental league. And so I think he's got a ways to go. And I'm just curious to see how much better he can get this year, and we can add that conversation on the 2023 draft.
Again, Chalk Talk brought to you by Owl's Nest Barbecue. Check that place out. Incredible selection of rubs and sauces, best in the tri-state area right there in Ottawa. And also, if you need your car worked on, you've got Steve Ray's Midnight Oil. So let me ask you this. Who are the top 3 SEC players that you have graded headed into the NFL draft?
Oh, the guys they're eligible in the draft. Yeah. Alabama.
You can't pick Will Anderson. He's next year, which I know you.
No. Look, I think that if you look at the top guys overall, I think that Jamison Williams is one of them. Evan Neal is one of them. So 2 Alabama guys definitely be in that group. I would probably say Travon Walker is in that group. So those would be the 3. Georgia's going to have a number of defensive guys. In my 22 first-round grades, I'm trying to think. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys graded with first-round grades. 7 guys. I think N'Kobe Dean is one. I think Charles Cross of Mississippi State's one. I think Derek Stingley's one. So those are the guys that I think are first-rounders out of the SEC in this year. First-round grades. Folks, there'll be a few more than that taken in the first round. With 22 first-round grades, obviously, you're talking about 10 to a dozen more that are going to have second-round value grades, in my opinion, that have to go in the first round. You got 32 picks.
Yeah, good stuff. So, again, we'll visit with Chris next week and with the latest on the Vols and more. This is Chalk Talk, brought to you by Owl's Nest Barbecue, Michelin, and Steve Ray's Midnight Oil, a presentation of Off the Hook Sports.